Now we'll come back and we'll continue our topic. Now, if they accept the challenge, they will experience interior freedom. They will become balanced, mature, and integrated person who know themselves. They will experience personally God's transforming power habitually. They will walk in the truth of who they are and who God is. They will receive the gift of contemplation, the gift of wisdom, the gift of humility, and the gift of the presence of God. These persons will be used by God for the spread of His kingdom in ways no one can imagine. For they can now say with St. Paul, I live now, not I, but Christ lives in me. Now, let us talk about, finally, the great crisis in our life that will happen to all of us. St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa calls this the passive night, meaning to say, now, it is not you who is trying to die to yourself, but it is God who is now processing you of the unconscious attachments that you have. Now, when I talk about the active discipline of John of the Cross, and the first of my talks, I am saying that it is I who try to discipline my inordinate attachment, what I know consciously. But then, there are many things in our unconscious that we do not know. Now, when we enter into the passive night that John of the Cross is talking about, now it is no longer I who is trying to free me from my attachment. It is already God who is trying to free me because I don't know that I am attached to them. So it is the unconscious that God is now trying to free us so that we will be transformed radically. There is some signs. You start to experience that everything is negative. You can no longer find satisfaction in your prayer, in your liturgy, in your community, in your family, in your work, and in your relationship. Everything becomes negative and meaningless. Now, we are being stripped by God of all human support. St. John of the Cross said that this suffering is induced by God. You know very well what is induced, pain. When a woman cannot give birth, the doctor will induce pain. Now, in the passive suffering, in the passive purification that John of the Cross calls the passive night, it is really God who induced the pain. Because why? We are now called to believe that God will really work here to love, even if things are not and people are no longer lovable, and to hope even without any security except from God. Now, the passive night is the purification of your unconscious. It is now God who purifies you. Then, little by little, your life is out of control. And the enslavement of the 7 capital sins that is deeply rooted in our unconscious is what the passive night will purify. And God touches us most touches our most vulnerable spot. But He touches us with what's this wisdom, tenderness, and love. Sometimes you are asking yourself, why is it that God make me suffer this when this is really the only thing that I really hold dear? I am so attached to this. That is the reason. It's not because He wants to take that away from you, but He wants you to be free from its attachment. God touches us in our most vulnerable spot. Slowly and tenderly and lovingly, He leads us into the night of faith, hope, and love. In my first conferences, I said that when we are in the 1, 2, 3 level, our faith, our hope, and our love is human. What is human faith? Now, for example, I believe in God because things are working very well. That's a human faith. Now, if things are not working very well, I will start to doubt if God really exists. So, that means that your faith is not supernatural. Now, love. I can love people who are good, but I cannot love people who are not good. So, meaning to say, your love is only natural. It's only human. Now, in the dark night, God is trying to transform your faith, your hope, and your love so that it will become Jesus, faith, hope, and love. It will become from the human faith, hope, and love. It will become supernatural faith, hope, and love. St. John of the Cross regrets that in spite of our many sacrifices that we have undergone in order to reach the dark night, we do not become truly free interiorly. We remain imprisoned and enslaved to some petty attachment, some habits of sin or imperfection that we cannot face and accept. So now, God carries us in His arms. According to St. John of the Cross, when you are not in the dark night, God only holds you by the hand. But the moment you enter into this suffering, God carries you in His arms. That's the reason why you cannot control your life anymore. Because God is now controlling your life since He is carrying you in His arms. You lose all control of yourself, of your loved ones, and your life. For example, I know of someone. He was a very, very successful businessman. And he prays, but he is always very, very busy. But sometimes, the wife used to ask him to go to Mass, and he is always saying, I am very busy, you can just do it, and all of that. And he said, but anyway, my wife used to play, while we are riding in the car, some tapes about the dark night. And I was listening. She said, I was a very successful businessman. And one day something happened. I just lose my sight. This is a dark night. In work, you were so successful. Slowly, you experience failure beyond your control. A relationship that you value so much. A work that you really love, and suddenly you lose your eyesight. This is a real dark night. And that man told me, if I did not hear all those talks about that the night, that there is a dark night, I don't know what will I do. Because, it is good for you to know that the dark night is really God's blessing to us. Because He wants us to free from our enslavements and to enjoy life as we should really enjoy. Now, the light of God, why is it dark? Actually, in the dark night, it is the action of God. It is the light of God that penetrates into you. But because God light is so different from any other human light that you know, you begin to close your eyes because your eyes is not prepared for this. I will give you an example. Suppose if I go outside and the sun is really very, very hot and very shining very brightly, and then I open my eyes and look at the sun. My eyes is not prepared for the light of the sun. That is why automatically I will close my eyes. That is what happens in the dark night. God enters into our life, and we are not prepared for the light of God. And so what happens now? God will stay there, so until little by little, if you do not run away, you are able, little by little, to be familiar with the light. That's what it is about. Now, the darkness, the pain, the suffering, and the confusion is really God Himself. That is the reason why, if we escape from our suffering, and then, for example, I am a religious, and I have problem with my community, so I said, I'll go to other communities. I will still experience the same suffering because it is me that is being purified by God. In fact, I can escape. That is why all our lives, for people who escape their suffering and they do not face it all their lives, they come and enter, they come and go, and their dark night is really prolonged. Now, that is why in our sufferings we used to say, God, where are you? He is there. But you cannot experience His presence because your heart is not yet prepared for the presence of God. And God will stay there in your heart until you become familiar with His presence, until you become familiar with His light. I will give you an example. For example, you go to the movie house. You are not familiar with the light of the movie house. So, it seems it's very, very dark. But as you stay there, little by little, you get familiar with the darkness. We have to go through the process of pain. For now, it is God who is processing us. Until we are purified, transformed, and liberated, it is now all God's work. We just have to remain passive under the loving hands of God. There are some signs that we are undergoing this kind of crisis. First, the person can no longer pray discursively by using his mind, his memory, and his imagination. He can no longer meditate. You have no more feelings when you pray. No more sensible consolation. You are very dry in your prayer. But at the same time, you do not also enjoy worldly amusements. Because it is normal that, for example, you are trying to go through the worldly attachment, then you will really become dry. Now, we are going to end this segment, and we will go to the next segment after the break. Thank you.